As Vuyiswa, Rise Mzansi's Gauteng Premier candidate, what is it you want Gautengians to know?
So the 29th of May really gives us an opportunity to turn this country around. And I'm calling on every single resident of Gauteng to not let this opportunity pass us by.
Rise Mzansi become kingmakers. And now we enter coalitions. Who are you guys willing to work with and not willing to work with? Welcome back to Palatable Politics, a show where we take the complexity out of politics and make it palatable for you. With me, your host, TJ Maslela. Welcome to the show. It's an election year, 29 May is around the corner, and in today's session, we're going to be going into the Manifesto of Rise Mzansi. And here to give us insight is none other than the National Chairperson and also the Premier candidate, Mrs. Vuyiswa Ramokgopa. Welcome to the show.
Hi, TJ. Thank you for having me on your show.
No, always a pleasure. So, can you walk us through your journey and how you got to being the National Chairperson?
Oh, goodness, where to start? This is my first foray into formal politics. I have spent the last 20 years engaged in business mostly. I started my career in retail as a retail buyer many years ago. This, by the way, was after studying politics. So I actually studied PPE at UCT, politics, philosophy, and economics, but then decided to pursue a career in the business space. I started my first business when I was 23 years old. It was a clothing boutique in Braamfontein in Juta Street, and it was a wonderful time to be in this city. And a time when the city was actually growing and there was a lot of development happening. Very exciting time to be running a business in the city at the time. I ran a number of other businesses subsequent to that. I was in the events space. I've run consulting companies for other SMMEs. And then my career pivoted into the property industry. I headed up the South African Institute of Black Property Practitioners for 7 years, and got into the world and space of advocacy and lobbying for transformation in the property sector. And that was a very important career pivot for me because it started to, bring me back to some of the issues that are most important to me, which is issues of economic justice, social justice. One of the things that has occupied my mind for the greater part of my adult life is how we deal with the crisis of inequality that we have in South Africa and that plagues every aspect of South African life. And so being in the property space, but being in that side of the property space, the policy side and the advocacy side, gave me a front row seat to where some of those blockages lie, financial access, land rights, and particularly urban land and spatial planning and what we need to do better to build more inclusive cities and have more inclusive spaces. But after a good 7 years of sitting across the table, trying to do the right thing and inputting into policy and making suggestions and even going to parliament and making representations, it became very clear to me that, the only real way that you can make impact is to have power, the power to act. It is one thing to be able to influence, to suggest, to make inputs, to make representations. But that doesn't help us move forward at the rate that we should if the people across the table are not implementing the suggestions and the recommendations. And if there's no political will to make, kind of the decisive interventions that need to be made. And that kind of led me down this road of asking, what more can I do? And I think there were many that are currently now the leaders and people that I work with within Rise Mzansi who are asking themselves the question themselves and saying, what can we as young professionals who have gained work experience, who have been inside different industries, who have seen some of these frustrations firsthand, it's just no longer good enough to sit on Twitter and complain. It is time, the time has come for us to just take that one step further, roll up our sleeves and do the work of fixing our country.
That sounds like you're very aligned with Rise Mzansi in terms of the messaging you guys have been putting out. Now, if we're to take a step back to the origin of Rise, how did it come about?
Yeah.
Who was there? And how did you guys determine who leads it?
Sure. And actually, you're asking the right person because I was there. I was one of the original founding members of at the time it was called the NCC, National Campaign Coordinating Committee, actually. And how it came about was actually as a function of, so late 2022, a number of civil society organizations came together in a convention or a conference at the end of 2022, of which one of the primary resolutions of this conference was that, you know, we needed a forum or a platform to be able to mobilize people's power to act. And what does that mean? It means there was a sense and a very clear sort of conclusion around the table that one of the issues that was facing even civil society was the fact that politics had long since departed from being about people. It was now just about politicians and power and wasn't accountable to people anymore. And so the question arose and said, how do we bring back the voice of people and the influence of people back into politics? And so the resolution out of that convention that took place was that we need not just a new party. It's not just about having a new party, but it's about fundamentally catalyzing a new way of doing politics. And to house that within a vehicle, a platform, a political party that can contest for power, but in doing so can take the voice of the people into the room, for lack of a better word. I know it may sound a bit abstract, but it's interesting because it's kind of like a new thing, but it's not. It's actually the oldest way of doing politics, which is deriving your mandate ultimately from people. And where are people? The 14 million people in this country who don't vote. Many of them may not vote and they may not engage in electoral politics. They may not be in active politics, but they are very politically active and making their voices heard, and they are expressing themselves politically in other forums, such as in civil society. So you've got lots of community-based organizations, lots of civil society organizations, lots of interest groups who are left out, quite frankly, of the actual decision-making, and they don't have the power to direct the way the government goes. So the decision was that something needed to exist to enable political contestation in a new way. And a task team was set up, of which I was part of that task team. Amongst others, there were about 10 of us. Songezo Zibi obviously was part of that, and Makashule Ghana and a few others. And the decision was that we will go and not just have it be ourselves, but actually go out and find others who would also be interested in embarking on a project of this nature and starting the road towards creating a credible political alternative to what we see currently in the political establishment. So that's where Rise Mzansi was born. End of 2022, that's us, 10 people. Many of us have never met each other. Some of us knew each other loosely from our own, social relationships and stuff. We get together, we start putting our heads around a table about what next. We come, the name comes about. We vote on it in the room. We start looking at logo, look and feel. We have creative friends who work in agencies and stuff who then are able to give us some of their time and volunteer to help us get that off the ground. Set up our first website. Set up some social media profiles and got going and started the process of getting ourselves registered as an actual political party. And the biggest task at that time was actually going to find others, because we knew already at that point that even the 10 of us around this table are too few for the scale of the task that we want to embark on.
So that's where you start with the friends and families.
Yes, and that's where you also start looking. So we looked in our ecosystems. We obviously, everything will start with your immediate networks, your relationships. So we looked within our networks, immediate relationships, and many of the current members of the NLC would have come out of many of those
NLC?
National Leadership Collective.
Okay.
And I'll
Thank
talk
you.
a bit about that as well. So at some point, we launched officially in April of 2023, but the work had already started a good 6 months earlier in November. And even doing, coming up, writing up the Constitution, deciding, who needs to do what. And to your point, at the beginning, at the inception of an organization of any sort, whether it's a company, whether it's an NPO, whether it's a political party, there are no members. So there can be no election.
Yes.
There's no one. There's nothing. There's no organization. There's no members. Every single political party that even exists today started with a group of people who sat around a table or sat under a tree and decided to do it. And they didn't get elected on day one. They showed leadership and they stood up and did something to resolve a certain issue that they saw. Now, similarly with us, we set it up. We went about a process now of developing a constitution. So we're currently governed under an interim constitution, which stipulates the structure of the organization, the roles, etc. And that interim constitution is due to take us up until our first election, which we have scheduled to happen before the next local government elections.
Okay.
So the thinking and the planning at this point, all things remaining equal, is that it will take place before the local government elections. We obviously needed to get going. And at the point when you are starting, I'm sure you would imagine, you don't have 10,000 people lined up wanting to quit their jobs, forego their salaries, risk their reputations to come and get involved in a political startup. So you work with whoever's around the table and who is willing and able to help.
Shout out to you guys for that. Now, we've seen a number of political parties, new political parties, come to the fray. You guys don't think that helps maintain the status quo or it confuses voters? Why not find a party and influence them?
Yeah. No, sure. I mean, coming back to a point I sort of touched on in my opening was that the genesis of Rise Mzansi is not, or the purpose of Rise Mzansi is not simply to be another political party. For lack of a better word, it is to disrupt the political culture in South Africa. We feel, and it is our view, that the culture of politics is what is broken in South Africa. And the political establishment, as in all the parties that currently exist, are participating in a type of politics that the vast majority of people have fundamentally rejected. And when I say majority, I'm saying that, well, it's not a pure majority, to be fair. There are 40 million registered. There are 40 million people who are eligible to vote, okay? Eligible. They could, because they're over 18. There are only 28 million who actually can vote, right? Who have actually registered themselves and said they will try. Of that, only half of that number actually do vote. So what you see is that of the 40 million that could, only 14 million do. And that is the crisis that we're dealing with in South Africa. It's not that people are particularly in love with the options that exist. When they don't like what they see, they just don't play the game.
Okay, right.
And when they don't play the game, it threatens democracy as a whole, not just the existence of one party. Because even the leading political party at national level was elected with 10 million votes. That's 10 out of the 40 that could have been. That means only 20, a quarter of people actually wanted them there. And that is the fact. It's a fact. 10 out of 40 million people voted for them, opted in. What happened to the rest? And this is the question that Rise Mzansi seeks to answer, is saying there is clearly something that is broken in the system and in the relationship that citizens have with politics. And what is that? And we identified a few different things. One of the things we identified was the levels of participation in politics. Now, technically speaking, our constitution describes and enables a participatory democracy. We have all the mechanisms with which to do that legislatively.
Yeah.
We have the three spheres of government. We've got, for example, when a piece of legislation is being considered, it goes out for public comment. There's a period of public comment, and then at some point it goes back to the various houses of parliament, etc. But in practice, people feel very disengaged and disassociated from political decision making. They feel like political leaders don't account to them. So after we elect somebody, we never see that person again. After the campaign season is over, we'll never see that person again. If and when we are dissatisfied with the performance of a public representative, there's nothing we can do about it. We as the citizens have no recall powers. Number 3, we have no ability to even select who those representatives are. All we can do is vote for the party. So you may like TJ. TJ is wearing a T-shirt of a party you don't like. Now, where does that leave you? So people want to, and this is why you've seen now this whole move or push towards independent candidates. So people were saying, maybe at least let's vote for independents. But our electoral system doesn't really enable independents to have the kind of influence that they'd like to think they will have. And so my point is, we need to be able to return power to people, create a system that is a lot more participatory, where leaders of political parties and representatives in political parties are actually accountable to the public. And we need to re-engage the public in a different way.
Yeah. With that, you guys have put together your list of representatives to go to parliament. How did you come up with that process?
Yeah, so this was exactly it. So we decided that, in an election, most people really only focus on the top job. They say, it's the president or the premier, or the mayor that they're voting for. But in all honesty, in a national election, for example, you're voting for 400 seats. There are 400 seats in the national legislature. All of those people have a say and a part of the governing at a national level, right? So we said, why shouldn't it be that the citizens should be able to have a say on every single person on our list? And in fact, what we then did was we opened up the nomination process, and we said, we're not going to sit in a dark room and decide amongst ourselves who must be on the list. We are going to invite the public to make nominations. But further to that, to ensure that it's not just simply a popularity contest, we appointed an independent nominations committee of very upstanding people, chaired by Dr. Brigalia Bam, who we know was also a former chair of the IEC, and others, Dr. Richard Calland, Prof. Stembete, and others who were involved in the vetting and interviewing of those candidates. We also had an external elections management company who was doing all of that administration. So we ceded that process over to other people, quite frankly, to say, you guys take the applications, you guys essentially come up with an objective scoring of all candidates in all regions, in all provinces, and compile a list. The NLC then has some very limited adjustment capabilities in that we can obviously, veto a candidate if we feel there's something very wrong with a candidate, if there's new information that arises, someone can be removed. Fortunately, we actually didn't have any of those. And also we can make adjustments where we feel somebody should be moved up on a list, not down, up. So that was the bit of adjustment that we could do, and it wasn't like free fall. It's a limited power, and we did that also to protect the integrity of the process, because the privilege to be a public representative should not solely be the domain of a party card-carrying member or of somebody who has risen through the ranks of branches and. The reality is that most people who have built professional capabilities or have built reputations out there in the world have not been sitting in branches rising from the ranks for the last 20 years. They've been out there in the world doing stuff. And our ability to then crowdsource the best talent in society is what is going to determine our success as a country in the next generation.
Okay. Now, going into the meat of the People's Manifesto, you guys have 5 priority points. We'll pick up a few and highlight them. But the first one, that has to do with leadership, governance, and implementation. Where's the system now, and what is it that you guys want to change exactly?
Yeah, so I mean, the first one is the one we've just spoken about. So effectively, we have a situation where the best in society are the least willing and able to lead in politics. And those who are available to lead in politics are not always the best in society. So we need a system that enables us to pipeline the best in society, and that is merit-based and competency-based, and a platform to do that. So that's what I just spelled out now. So we have looked at it at an electoral system level, right? So one of the issues that we've identified is the fact that we have a closed list electoral system, right? Proportional representation electoral system, and it's party based. So you have to generally be a member of a party, go through a party conference, be elected in the party conference, and you make it on the list. We're saying that system doesn't work. It doesn't kick out the best. And it also opens itself to patronage and all of the ills of society that we've seen. So we need an open list, constituency based electoral system. In fact, a bit of a hybrid between what we currently have, because proportional representation is fine, but you need proportional representation such that the representatives that are on that list must still be linked to a constituency that they account to.
So this would kind of be replicating what's done at local government.
Yeah, a version of that.
Okay.
A version of that, exactly. So, because indeed, when we look at the 400 people in Parliament right now, I mean, I can't tell you who represents me. If I have a problem and my constituency has a problem, I'm not sure who to go to deal with that problem. We know that they have constituency days, but there's no accountability on how that time is spent and sort of who they need to be spending that time with.
But, given that the current system does have constituency offices, which are supposed to be in each region, etc., how useful they are, different story. But would you say that system might not be in place already and it's just a thing of utilizing it?
Yes and no, because it's not about just having constituency offices. It's about where is the accountability? What is the accountability mechanism for a citizen, right? So Parliament and the structure of Parliament is that it's supposed to be a proxy for us. We can't all go. Yes. We can't all be involved in decision making. We delegate responsibility to representatives on our behalf. But we cannot tell a single member of Parliament how to vote on an issue. When a vote comes up in Parliament, they are not coming to ask me how they should vote. They as a party are sitting around and deciding what and how they're going to vote, whether I like it or not. And at the point when I'm not happy about the direction of a vote, I can't recall, I can't complain, there's nothing I can do. I've now handed the vote over. And I have
5 years.
And I have to wait 5 years before I can do something about it. And so the issue is around accountability and how we ensure almost a dual accountability between the actual citizens and the voters. And the party should be more of a facilitator of all of that. What we see is the exact opposite, where once the election has happened, they don't need us anymore. It's all the party. We protect the party. We close ranks around each other. We vote the way we want to vote. We're having mindless debates about secret ballots and not secret ballots. And again, nothing to do with us as the citizens, all to do with their internal power plays. And so we're saying, in essence, if it was a thing that was if it was about the citizens, it wouldn't be a question. You would have to have an open ballot. It couldn't be a secret. Because you would need to be accountable to the public on how you vote on things.
Fine, fair enough. That makes sense. On the implementation aspect of still on priority 1 is implementation.
Yeah.
there's been a bit of controversy, a bit of hot and cold, is BEE. Some say it's great, just hasn't been implemented properly. You guys have a particular view on it. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, so let me make it very clear. We 100% believe in affirmative action and in ensuring that the injustices of the past are rectified through a proper program of affirmative action. We believe also in social justice and ensuring that every single citizen, regardless of their class, their race, their whatever, is afforded a certain base level of social support and in dignity, and that their human rights are obviously respected and adhered to as a citizen. And I say this because BE is but one little policy. It is but one pillar of how you deliver social justice and economic justice.
Including transformation.
Yeah, but I'm saying it's one thing. It's one mechanism. BE doesn't help us deal, for example, with spatial injustice. It also doesn't help us deal with structural inequality. It doesn't help us deal with that at all. BE helps us deal with how we get people who are actually already in a position of relative privilege to get shares of formerly 100% white-owned companies. So it enables BE transacting to happen at that level. It also enables and creates a mechanism for, let me say, CSI, large-scale CSI, through skills development payments, some social economic development, and so on and so forth. I want to come to enterprise and supplier development because theoretically this should be where it's making a serious impact. And I think to some extent it has. But ESD, again, is not affecting, it doesn't touch the black women who are selling clothes and their wares on the side of the road outside every shopping center in every township in South Africa. Those people are not beneficiaries of ESD. Why? Because they're not in the system. If you want to be an ESD or a supplier development, it already means you're like already here. You're entering already with some level of access and you were able to even know about the ESD program. You could get in, So what am I getting at? I'm saying that we have a massive problem on our hands of structural inequality. We have a financial inclusion problem. You and I today, we want to go start a business or we want to go get capital to rapidly increase our business. BE cannot help us with that. Okay?
Okay.
And that is how we transform ourselves and how we transform the economy, by enabling genuine black-owned businesses to be able to become mega enterprises. So it's a combination of an enabling industrial policy, but also having the tools and mechanisms in place that enable those businesses to scale to that extent. We are 30 years into our democracy. We are 20 years into BEE. We don't have a national black-owned food retailer. That's one industry. I could go across all the industries. So I'm saying the failure of BEE is the inability, one, to solve the structural issues. Where it has been successful, and I'm happy and very willing to concede, is in the area of transforming, let me say, the management layers of many formerly white-owned companies. So we've done a very good job of driving employment and transforming the upper senior executive layers of a lot of companies and boards. And I think that's something to be commended, but we can never imagine and lie to ourselves that BE is a panacea for the structural inequality and socioeconomic inequality that we experience in South Africa. And to do that, we're going to need a suite of policies that need to tackle these issues head on.
Yeah. Can we go into those policies that Rise Mzansi?
Yeah.
1st of June, Rise Mzansi comes into power. What are the first 5 things they would do to achieve that?
Yeah, so there are a number of things. And sorry to be a bit technical, but When you say come into power, what do you mean?
51%
Okay.
can choose the president and
Okay.
cabinet,
All right. No,
etc.
that's an important distinction
Yes, no, fine,
because
fair enough.
between now and then, one's options are limited. But let's assume we are in a Rise Mzansi government and we have carte blanche over what we can now implement at a policy level. Our view is that one of the biggest challenges that we have is the ability. It's actually, we don't have a problem of the elite and them being able to get shares of companies. The problem that we have is that we're unable to deal with, let me say, structural poverty, the issues, the things, the building blocks of poverty, right? So one of them, for example, is spatial injustice and spatial inequality. Many people, I mean, we have a expanded unemployment rate. We have 11.9 million people who are who are unemployed, who aren't even earning an income. So we're not even at the point where we're talking about employment equity there. They're not in the employment equity conversation. They're just not even employed. So the starting point of what we need to be doing is talking about how we get people on the employment ladder. But one of the first issues that I said is around spatial inclusion. Most people will tell you that the reason they are no longer looking for work or aren't interested anymore is they can't afford to. It's too expensive. The cost of taking a taxi to go to town to look for work, to not be sure whether you're going to come back with something, is absurd. Many people even have jobs, they quit because what they're earning and what they're spending on transport makes it not worth it. They come home at the end of the month with very little. So the first part we're saying is we need to make sure that we have cities that are properly designed, where we have economic opportunities and industrial hubs close to where people live, right? So special economic zones, industrial hubs close to where people live is number one. Number two is public transport. We need a proper, fully functioning, well-subsidized, integrated public transport system. Because again, 40% of most people's income is spent on public transport. And if we want to get the economy ticking, that's one of the quickest and shortest routes to getting that going. So that would involve properly regulating all players in the public transport space, even the privately owned ones, and ensuring that we have public transport that's affordable and available to everyone. Access to finance is another key one. And I'm not just using the phrase willy-nilly. I'm saying we need to be very clear about having venture capital and low-cost capital in abundance for entrepreneurs, particularly Black and women-owned entrepreneurs. Currently, you want to get a loan for whatever, even if you go to the NEF. Let's say you've got a great idea, go to the NEF, you want a loan. The NEF is likely to lend you money at a rate higher than an average commercial bank. It's not their fault. It's because they themselves are bound. They're borrowing from capital markets. They need to make a bit of a profit. They're not getting enough subsidization from government, and so therefore they have to sustain themselves. They have to make money, and so they themselves are not even able to give the levels of concessionary capital that they should be giving to Black-owned businesses. And we're saying we need a deep pool of capital that is available at a concessionary pricing for businesses that are viable. And it must be venture capital by nature. And there you can look at redirecting money coming out of the money from the pension funds, the likes of UIF. I mean, we're now able to spend billions on election programs, but we're not able to fund the things that actual jobs come from, you know? So these are the types of things. The other thing that one could look at, and I mean, looking at the recent BEE report, 26 billion rand was spent on ESD funding. So these enterprise supplier programs, the ones that they do mentorships and all these other things, they give you office space. I'm sure you've seen these programs, right? They'll give you everything but money. And what the BE Commission's report demonstrated was that private sector contributed 26 billion rand to ESD. But the portion, and ESD, by the way, allows companies to actually finance small businesses.
Yes.
But it's the mechanism that is used the least, because there's no way to manage that money and to ensure that it's going to the right places and whatever. So my point is that the things are there, the money is there, but we're not channeling funds towards the things that they should be used for. And so when we talk about access to finance, again, we're not saying it has to sit purely on government's shoulders. We're saying that you need to have the right kind of institutional framework and institutions that enable that to be possible. So that would be another one. And that deals with a few levels. I'm sure you're hearing me. I'm saying we're dealing with the bottom. We're dealing with the middle. We're dealing with the creation of black-owned businesses and the scaling of black-owned businesses so that we can have genuine, black industrialists, the real ones, that can create jobs and that can do all the nice things we want to see done. And then when we have that, we won't be crying and waiting in lines to become board members of white-owned companies, because we'll have our own companies that we can be board members of, and we can hire whoever we want to come and sit on our boards. And that is the world we need to be working towards.
Okay. So, in that, I know that you have previously highlighted that a lot of your guys' priority points just overlap also, as in they just how things work. So, we've largely covered the governance aspect and the economic aspect. With regards to the individual and family well being,
Yeah,
I know you're so passionate about
very.
that. Can you walk us through it?
Look,
The highlights.
a highlights package. So, the thesis here is that the smallest unit of governance is the family. Every aspiration we have from this country, for this country, like if you want to talk about crime, dealing with social ills, dealing with da da da, every single individual in this country comes from somewhere. And it is that foundational set of values, principles, the experience that they have in their family, whatever type of family they come from, that shapes their view on the world and that kicks out a criminal or a president, So we have to go back to investing in the family unit. And again, it is part of restorative justice, because we know that one of the key elements and successes of the apartheid regime was the destruction of the black family. So if we are to rebuild not just the economy and all other aspects, we must start with rebuilding the family and go back to the basic tools of what does it mean? What do we need? What are the ingredients? And how do we ensure that families are together? And again, and I know I sound like a broken record, but it's, again, the topic of spatial justice comes into play. Again, the topic of even employment comes into play, because many, right now we're running a campaign about single mothers. 45% of households in this country are headed by single mothers. That is a staggering statistic. Another big chunk of them, 17%, are just parentless, by the way. So you've got 45% headed by women, about 17% of children that are growing up without parents, child-headed households and such, and others that are in other formats and variations. They could be raised by their grandparents, da-da-da.
Yeah.
2% is single dads.
Only two.
Interesting stat, yeah. Only 2%. But that's to be expected in a country
I
like
knew it
ours.
was low. I just didn't know it was that low.
My point is that we have to get back to supporting the family unit in whatever shape or form it may come from. So ensuring that the primary caregivers in households have the necessary tools and resources to be able to develop and grow families. If you are a single mother and you are working, for example, as a domestic worker, or you are working far from your home and you need to be at Pick n Pay when they open their doors at 8 a.m., it means you've got to leave your house at 5:30 or 5 a.m., catch your taxi, blah, 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 to be at the door by 8 a.m. So no one's getting your children ready. You're not dropping them off. You're not doing anything. They're likely walking themselves to school. They are in danger as they walk themselves to school. And same thing, they must bring themselves back home You are not able to do homework with them. You're not able to invest in their upbringing and their well-being. They
Which falls
just
also under the social inequality.
all of those things. Now, those things are all linked to each other. So if you want to start talking about, if you want to give parents more time with their children, then you must ask the question, how do we do that? And if parents are not going to be home with their children, we need to invest in childcare facilities and have government subsidized childcare facilities and creches that are available in every single community where people are living. And that is one of the things we've said we will deliberately invest in. The other thing we have to go back to investing in is community facilities, as in sports grounds,
Or the recreational.
art centers, recreation centers, and ways for people to develop themselves holistically, particularly children. Because, I mean, I've just in the short last few months that I have been running my Gauteng campaign, it has been heartbreaking to see children who play in the street in toxic waste sewerage because of infrastructure that's not functional, etc., etc. And when you grow up in that environment, you have a perspective on the world that I am worthless. I don't matter. I come from a place where people don't care if I run around in sewerage. What type of human being are we then breeding? And then we wonder why people turn to drugs and turn to crime and turn to all kinds of other social ills. Why 9-year-old children are sexually abusing and raping 5-year-olds. Because there's no adults around. Because there's no social fabric or moral fiber that is guiding us and putting us together as a society. And so we have to go back to investing in those things deliberately as a government. And so Rise Mzansi very much understands our macro issues in a very micro sense. We're saying it's about the family, create an enabling environment for families to exist, subsidize single parents, ensure that they have the funds to actually feed and look after their children, create employment so that men don't have to run away because they can't pay papgeld. They must work so that they can support their families. It's fine if they don't get along with the mother anymore. It's not a problem. But it shouldn't be then you are forced to run away from your responsibilities because you are living with the shame of being unemployed and unable to care for your family. And these are the effects and the violence actually of a society that is unjust in the way that ours is. And so that is just a core priority for us.
Okay. So I know you touched on providing a subsidy towards single mothers, etc. Is that not already in place with regards to the grant system and the different aspects of the grant system? How would you guys change that, if anything?
Well, I think there are a number of elements. Firstly, there are single mothers at all levels of society. So the one, which is the child grant, 550. I mean, it's 550. So, like,
And Pampers
not a
is
real
250.
thing. Not a real thing. A pack of nappies, exactly, is 250. So, not a real thing. So that needs to be increased if we're going to have it. Either we have it or we don't have it. But if we're going to have it, it needs to be linked to something real and to the actual cost of living and the cost of raising a child. That's number one. Number two, child care is also a massive part of subsidizing the existence of a child. So, like I said to you, ensuring that there are child care facilities that are subsidized and available for anyone, so that women can go to work in peace, not having to leave children with a creepy uncle. That's number two. And then for the so-called missing middle, there are many mothers who earn above what would be eligible for the child care for the 550, but they earn too little. So if you're earning like 5,000, 6,000 a month, you are smack bang in the middle. If you're earning even 10,000 a month, you're looking after 2 kids, you've got some serious expenses on your hands to deal with, medical expenses and so on and so forth. So we're saying there should be a tax break that's also available for those who are in the tax earning brackets, but are still relatively low income earners. and who are single parents, and various other things. I mean, I think we also want to spend a lot of time investing in early childhood development and early childhood development centers and so on and so forth. But it's really about providing a suite of support that ultimately the beneficiary is the child. Because if we can, I mean, one of the things which is not necessarily directly linked to the single moms thing, but it affects, of course. We've identified hunger as a massive issue that people are dealing with. I'm not just talking about like general sort of high level agriculture issues. I'm saying the majority of low income or no income earning South Africans, many of whom are African, live on one meal a day, if at all. Some go days without meals. We saw horrific cases in the Eastern Cape of 2 women who killed themselves and their children because they could not feed them, because they were hungry. As a mother myself, I know what that must do to you and where you must be mentally and psychologically to even imagine that killing your children is a better fate for them than them sitting and suffering with hunger. And so for us, that would be an urgent priority as well. We want to put an immediate intervention to have like food voucher type of product where people, doesn't matter, just you can be guaranteed your 3 meals a day so that you should be able to walk into any affiliated grocery retailer. There should be a range of products that are subsidized by government directly, and anyone should be able to walk into a grocery retailer and buy food. In a country like ours, that is a net exporter of food, nobody should be going hungry.
Would this replace or complement the current school's nutrition program?
Remember, the school nutrition program is for children in school, number one. It's not for everyone. So that's the starting point. So, and number two, there have been massive problems with school nutrition programs. The other issue, which is bubbling, and I think we're not hearing enough of, is that the intermittent electricity supply and the water issues cause interruptions in the school nutrition programs. They don't make the food when there's no electricity or where there's no water. Or the school has to close because there's no water. We were in Diepkloof just recently where they had to close the school down for a couple of days. And now imagine if you're a child in that school and that is your only plan. That's the only way you're going to get a meal. Now, because there's no water, sorry for you. You're not getting food. So we're saying there shouldn't be dependencies. Whether you go to school, don't go to school, whether you are an adult or a child or whatever, food is a basic human right. Every South African citizen, every resident, everyone who's eligible must be able to get food.
Okay. So that's if you guys come into power. Let's say now you guys become kingmakers. And now we enter coalitions. Who are you guys willing to work with and not willing to work with, if any?
So I always find this question really interesting because it kind of feels like we're in a primary school playground. Like, who are you talking to, and who's your friend and who's not your friend? It's like that's not how this thing works. We need, given the electoral system we have, that we are all participating in, we have, by design, agreed to cooperate. Because the way our electoral system is designed is that it is such that different constituencies must contest for power. If you have 6 different parties who make up the 100%, they must find a way to move forward with each other. It may be in the form of a formal coalition. It may be in the form of voting together on individual issues and not on others, etc., etc. But this is the way our government works. So coming back to your question, I'm saying we're not here to have there's no individuals that we don't like or won't work with or any such things. Ours is a function of, one, what mandate would we have been given by our voters in terms of the outcomes that they want to see. So one of the outcomes that the thing that we have run on this election is we've said we need new leaders so we can reform this government. That is number one. We have a serious issue of a dysfunctional government because we have a leadership crisis. So we are not willing to work with people who are not committed to that, are not committed to clean governance, are not committed to, conducting themselves ethically, and people who essentially have a track record or even a case on their heads where they are where it's been proven that they have behaved unlawfully. Now, that would be the complete opposite of why we came into this. We are here because we've seen the crisis, we want to fix it. So we're not going to be perpetuating the crisis when we get into power. I think that's number one. Number two is, again, outcomes driven and saying, what are some of the key things? So we should be able to have a program of action that says, our priorities, and my priority as the Premier of Gauteng, is to deliver the following three things, right? Let's say we want to expand the railway network to improve public transport. We want to invest in some housing developments and do some infrastructure development. I'm just making an example.
Yeah.
And focus on education. Those would be the three things, for example. We need to be able to work with anyone who is willing to help us deliver those outcomes on behalf of our constituency. That is the long and short of it. And the nature of the system is that there will always be a quid pro quo because we have our constituency, others have theirs. So in all coalition governments all over the world, people who have very different ideological views find a way to work together because they agree on a set of outcomes. And so my sense is that it will obviously largely depend on the numbers at the end of the day. And we don't have a lot of time to be negotiating coalitions. So I think the period is still set at 2 weeks. So yeah, it's going to be very important going into, before even the elections, for us to be clear and be able to communicate to the public what our program of action is that will determine who we go into government with.
Okay. Lastly.
And just as a last point, we're also not hungry. We're not desperate to be in power. It's not at all costs. We're not at a point where we're like going to sell our souls just to get a MEC position or something. That's not why we got into this. If we are not able to find a version that works for us, we are more than happy to continue the journey. Rise Mzansi is not here for one election. We are already starting to do the work. We'll work towards 2026 and get an outright mandate and work towards 2029. We don't have a problem with that.
Lastly, Rise Mzansi's had one of the best visibility campaigns, which raises a question. Where's the money coming from?
Oh.
Who's funding?
Sorry, I thought you were going to talk about the visibility and all the exciting stuff.
No, we've seen it. We've seen the
this is
posters.
it's such a non-issue because we did publish our the IEC published the declarations a couple of weeks ago, and it's a mix of funding sources. We have had some high net worth individuals. We've had some donations in kind. But it's all publicly available. I mean, it's there. It's on the IEC's website. We, in fact, published it even before they did, so that we could give context. And the context was really to explain to people that politics is expensive. And even though we published a declaration that demonstrated that we got 17 million rand, that is a drop in the ocean compared to what our competitors are working with. People think 17 million is a lot of money. It's not.
Not in the politics game.
Not in the politics game. To organize one little stadium party at Moses Mabhida comes in at no less than 50 million. So the real question we should be asking is, who are people not declaring? I think that's the missing question in this conversation. Parties that are declaring 5 million, 10 million, others are declaring nothing. But yet successfully putting banners and posters all over the city, filling up stadiums, printing T-shirts, like, wow.
Is it one you'd like to give insight on?
No, I'm just saying that for me is a bigger question and a bigger threat, I think, to our democracy is that, for us, the key principle here is transparency. Somebody at some point is going to have to pay for things to get done because we don't have a culture of small money and crowdfunding as yet in our country. I, as a voter personally, would prefer to be in a position where I know who that is, rather than the case that we've had to date with many of the other parties where they just don't tell us. That is a scarier prospect to me, that we have a whole lot of people lurking in the shadows that we don't know who are funding our politics, and we're unable to hold people accountable to that.
We've gone through the manifesto, the People's Manifesto. Now, 29 May is around the corner. In 30 seconds, why should someone vote for Vuyiswa as Gauteng's premier candidate? 30 seconds.
Yeah, that's a hard one.
The camera there.
Look, Gauteng is the economic capital of this country, of South Africa. And the many issues that we experience, be it unemployment, be it crime, the spatial injustice, the inequities, and all of the things that worry all of us are most pertinent, I think, in Gauteng. And so it is absolutely critical that we get this province right, that we get it back on track. And to do that, we need competent people, ethical people, people who are willing to do the hard things and make the hard decisions. And unfortunately, that cannot be done. We can't. The people that made the mess can't be the ones that we expect to fix it. It is time for us to look for new leaders and entrust new leaders with forging a path for us for the next generation. And I believe that I am one such leader. I have had a long history of leading in various types of organizations, and I think this will be the next big task and one which I will set my mind to diligently.
Thank you for that. I do wish you the best.
Thank you.
And you'll receive a call to come back and we'll discuss the results and the way forward, how you guys are going to implement the manifesto.
Thank you very much. I look forward to that.
Thank you for tuning in. Please do come out and make your mark on the 29th of May. Not saying rise, ANC or anybody. I'm just saying make your mark. Don't let anyone tell you.
Do the right thing.
And yeah. But before that, don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and tune in same place, same time next week.